How does a mother who survived war end up staring down the barrel of a gun at her own son's funeral? It began on a heavy, oppressive morning at Arlington, the kind of gray sky that felt like it was grieving right along with you. General Ava Rostova had seen this too many times. She'd folded the flags and stood stoic through the final salutes for other people's children. But this was different. This casket, draped in the stars and stripes, held her son, Sergeant Alex Rostova, 29 years old, gone. An IED on a routine patrol in Fallujah had stolen him. She wore her full-dress uniform, just as he'd always asked. "Mom," he'd said, "when it's my time, I want to see you standing there in your stars." So she did. The deep blue jacket, the medals on her chest telling the story of her life. From the outside, she was a fortress, but inside, her soul was shattering. The black SUV pulled up to Section 60, the final resting place for the fallen from the most recent wars. Ava sat wedged between her sister Lena and Alex's godfather, Marcus Cole. He was a master sergeant she'd served with back in Ramadi. Her hands shook, clutching the funeral program. On the cover, her son was grinning in his fatigues. It felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. "I don't know if I can do this," Ava whispered to no one in particular. Her voice was hollow, all the emotion drained out of it. "You've done harder," Marcus murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "But that doesn't make this right." The car door opened. As Ava stepped out, her heels clicked on the pavement. A few soldiers nearby recognized her and saluted. She was a general, the first woman to climb so high in her field. But today, none of that mattered. Today, she was just a mom walking toward a hole in the ground that would swallow her world. Then she saw him, a local cop pacing near the cars. His patrol vehicle was parked crooked, its lights off but the engine still running. He had on those mirror sunglasses, even with the thick cloud cover. A knot of ice formed in Ava's stomach. He wasn't part of the honor guard. He was just traffic control, and you could tell he had no idea what was happening here. He turned, his eyes hidden behind the glasses, and his gaze locked onto her. "Hey!" he barked out, his voice sharp. "Ma'am, I need to see some ID." Ava just blinked. Surely he wasn't talking to her. "I'm talking to you," he said, louder this time, taking a step toward her. His hand was now resting on the grip of his pistol. "I'm General Ava Rostova," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here for my son's funeral." "I said stop right there," he shouted. And then the unthinkable happened. He pulled his weapon. A gasp rippled through the mourners. Ava froze, her hands slowly rising into the air. "I am not armed," she said, her voice a low, calm command. "This is my dress uniform. You are making a terrible mistake." But the officer, Caleb's, didn't listen. His gun was leveled at her chest, and his next words made the world stop. "Drop to the ground, now!" 30 years of training kicked in. Every instinct screamed at her. She'd faced down threats in foreign lands, stared into the eyes of the enemy, but never, not once, did she imagine it would come to this. A gun in her face, in this sacred place, on this unbearable day. "I am an unarmed United States Army general," she stated, her voice ringing with authority. "And you are pointing your weapon at a mother trying to bury her son. I don't care what kind of costume you're wearing," Caleb snapped back. "Get on the ground before I put you there." That's when Marcus moved. "Sir," he said, stepping forward, his hands open, "that is General Rostova. You need to put that weapon down right now." "Back off!" Caleb yelled, swinging the gun from Eva to Marcus. Lena started to sob next to the car. One of the young soldiers from the honor guard tensed, ready to move, but his commanding officer shot him a look that froze him in place. No one wanted this to get worse. Ava remained perfectly still, her hands in the air. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of disbelief and fear. But her voice, when she spoke, was ice. "Officer," she said slowly, "I am going to reach into my coat pocket, and I am going to show you my military ID." "You reach, I shoot," he said, his voice cold and certain. All around them, you could hear the soft shuffle of feet as mourners pulled their children away, their whispers cutting through the silence. Two women who had served with Ava already had their phones out, recording everything. That's when one of the honor guard soldiers finally broke protocol, his voice urgent but low on his radio. "Requesting immediate supervisor at Section 60. We have an armed officer threatening a general. Repeat, this is urgent." But help was still a lifetime away. Officer Caleb's never wavered. "Turn around," he growled. "On your knees, hands on your head." Eva closed her eyes for a single painful second. She had survived live fire. She had walked through the ruins of bombed-out cities. She had lost friends, soldiers, and now her only son. But this moment, This humiliation was a different kind of wound. Still, she began to lower herself to the asphalt. She did it not out of fear, but to protect everyone else. The last thing she wanted was for her son's funeral to become a bloodbath. From the crowd, an old vet in a wheelchair yelled out, "What in God's name is wrong with you? That's General Rostova." Caleb's didn't even flinch. He was in his own world now, tunnel vision fixed on her. Someone shouted, "Somebody stop that maniac!" But Ava raised her hand just slightly. A small, silent command. No. That's when another officer came sprinting down the road. Lieutenant Maria Flores. She'd been directing traffic at the main gate and saw the crisis from 50 yards out. "Caleb's, holster your weapon! Now!" she screamed as she ran. He didn't move. The gun stayed fixed on Ava. "I said holster it! That is a 3-star general!" Flores was right in his face now. When he still refused, she didn't hesitate. She slammed her hands against his arm, knocking the pistol from his grip. It clattered loudly on the pavement. Stunned, Caleb staggered back and instinctively reached for the fallen weapon. Flores was faster. She twisted his arm behind his back in a control hold. "You're done," she seethed through clenched teeth. "You are done." Other officers rushed in, finally dragging a struggling Caleb's away. Ava was still on her knees, hands on her head. A soldier, Sergeant Ramirez, who had been under Ava's command in Ramadi, hurried to her side. "Ma'am, it's over," she said gently, helping her to her feet. "We've got you." Ava stood, her legs feeling heavy as stone. She looked out at the sea of shocked faces, the silent tears, and the casket. Her son's casket, still waiting. This sacred moment had been stolen, shattered. And if she thought the nightmare was over, she was wrong. This was just the beginning. Within minutes, the videos were everywhere. The image of Officer Caleb's pointing a gun at a kneeling General Eva Rostova was exploding online. By 10:06 a.m., the cemetery was swarming with police, military brass, and news reporters. But the crowd, the mourners who came to honor a fallen soldier, they had seen it with their own eyes. They couldn't shake the image of a mother in uniform, brought to her knees on the worst day of her life. Ava was guided to a small tent for privacy. Her hands trembled so much she couldn't remove her hat. Her body was still locked in survival mode. Marcus stood beside her, his face a mask of silent rage. He had seen the horrors of war, but he looked like he couldn't breathe. Outside the tent, Sergeant Ramirez was arguing with 2 local cops. "Your man just threatened to execute a grieving mother. You think he was just on traffic duty? Is an excuse that's going to work on the 6 o'clock news?" Meanwhile, Caleb sat cuffed in the back of a squad car, his face blank. He never asked if Ava was okay. He never asked about her son. The only thing he muttered over and over was, "She didn't belong here. She wasn't acting right." Back in the tent, Ava finally spoke, her voice a raw whisper. "He saw my skin before he saw my stars." Marcus just bowed his head. "I've survived war zones," she said, her voice breaking. "I have been a target for our nation's enemies. And the only time a gun has ever been pointed in my face on American soil was by one of our own. At my son's funeral." Lena took her sister's hand. "He didn't break you, Ava." Ava slowly shook her head. "He didn't have to. He broke this day. This was supposed to be for Alex. Now this day would always be about him." The cop. Outside the tent, a young soldier who served with Alex was already live streaming, her voice shaking with rage. "This is what we deal with. You can be a general, a mother, in uniform, at your own son's funeral, and they still see a threat. I watched him pull a gun on a woman I would follow into hell." Within an hour, millions had seen it. The story was everywhere. The funeral finally resumed, nearly 2 hours late. There were no speeches, no final bugle call, just a quiet, broken ceremony. Ava placed her hand on the polished wood of the casket, whispering a final goodbye only Alex would hear, before she stood and walked away. The Army trains you to keep moving, even when your heart is full of glass. But the world wasn't moving on. By 3 p.m., #justice for General Rostova was trending everywhere. The shaky cell phone video was undeniable. You could see Ava hands in the air. You could hear the officer scream, "Get on the ground!" There was no way to spin it. The police department tried. They posted a sterile corporate statement online. "We are aware of an incident. The officer has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." That was it. No apology, no mention of a 3-star general, a grieving mother, or a gun. The backlash was immediate and fierce. A sitting senator tweeted, "You call that an incident? It's a national disgrace." That evening, a retired general who had been Eva's mentor went on live television, her voice cracking. "I have to explain to America that one of our finest was treated like a criminal while trying to bury her child. This wasn't a mistake. It's a reflection of something deeply wrong." By nightfall, silent protesters gathered outside the police station. Many were veterans in uniform, holding simple signs. "She served." He drew a gun. Ava remained silent, hidden away from the world at her sister Lena's home. But the world came to her. Banners of support appeared on the fence. Letters poured in from Gold Star families across the country. "I'm sorry the uniform didn't protect you," one mother wrote. Marcus stayed close, making sure she ate, making sure she was safe, a silent guardian in her grief. On the fourth day, Ava finally spoke. Not to the press, but to a private room of military families. No cameras were allowed, but someone recorded it anyway. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I didn't cry when they told me Alex was gone. I didn't cry when they handed me his flag-draped casket. But I cried when that officer pointed his gun at me." She paused and the room held its breath. "Not because I was afraid. I cried because I realized the uniform I gave my life to, the stars on my shoulder, couldn't stop him from seeing me as a threat first." That raw human confession hit harder than any legal statement ever could. It lit a fire that couldn't be contained. The Department of Justice opened a federal investigation. The governor called it a grotesque betrayal. And Officer Caleb's? His union said they wouldn't comment. He remained silent. 6 months later, the nation's front row seat was a packed federal courtroom. It was filled with military personnel in dress uniforms, veterans who took up entire rows, and press who had been waiting since 5 in the morning. The Rostova family sat near the front. Ava was in simple civilian clothes. No ribbons, no stars, just Ava. Caleb's entered in a gray suit. No badge, no tie. And it seemed without an ounce of regret. His lawyer played the standard card. My client was acting in the line of duty, responding to a perceived threat. But those words meant little because the jury wasn't just listening. They were watching the video. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. On the screen, that gray morning came to life. Caleb's voice, sharp and loud. "Hands where I can see them." The room tensed. Ava Rostova, in her full military uniform, standing calmly with her hands raised. And he never lowered the gun. When the lights came back on, no one said a word. Then came the testimony. First, Lieutenant Maria Flores, the officer who stopped Caleb's. She didn't hold back. He refused to listen. He was aggressive and locked in. "I had to physically knock the weapon from his hands." The defense attorney tried to push back. "So you used force on a fellow officer?" Flores shot back. "I stopped him from shooting an unarmed, grieving mother. Call it what you want." Next was Marcus. He spoke quietly, but his voice filled the room. "I've seen enemy fire, but I've never felt more helpless than in that moment. She acted like the soldier she is, and he looked at her like she was nothing." Then the prosecution dropped a bombshell. Caleb's internal affairs record. 9 previous complaints for excessive force. One was a near-perfect match. A Black Army Reserve captain, stopped in uniform, held at gunpoint. The case had been dismissed as a misunderstanding. It was clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. The prosecution showed a photo of Alex Rostova on the screen. "General Rostova came to bury her only son," the prosecutor said. "Instead of respect, she faced a weapon aimed at her heart. Not for what she did, but for what he saw when he looked at her." Then it was Ava's turn. She stood before the jury. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here for accountability. I don't want another soldier's mother to kneel in fear." She looked directly at Caleb's. "I am not a symbol. I am a mother. And because of you, my son never had the funeral he deserved." Caleb's looked down. For the first time. The jury took 4 hours. The verdict? Guilty, on all counts. The judge didn't hesitate. "Officer Caleb's, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." There was only silence in the room, heavy and sharp. After the verdict, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Microphones buzzed like flies. "General Rostova, do you feel justice was served?" Ava was quiet, looking up at the gray clouds. Just like that day. Lena and Marcus stood beside her. Finally, she stepped forward to the microphones. "I didn't come here for revenge," Ava began, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came for accountability." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the reporters. "My question is this. If a 3-star general in full uniform can be seen as a threat while trying to bury her son, what does that mean for every other citizen who doesn't have rank and medals to protect them? This isn't just my story. It's a mirror held up to the country. It is time for us to truly look at the reflection. Those words, raw and undeniable, echoed far wider and lasted far longer than the trial. But Eva didn't care about the spotlight. She went home. On a quiet Monday morning, before the gates of Arlington were even open to the public, she returned. She brought a single folding chair and one sunflower, Alex's favorite. She sat by his grave for a long time, listening to the wind rustling through the grass, the silence of a sun now gone.